Thank you very much for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to attend. It means a lot to us, and we would like to say thank you very much to everyone in Vietnam that's helped us with the conference. Specifically, thank you to the local organizers in Hanoi, the Institute of Environmental Science and Engineering, without which this conference would be nothing than just an idea in our head. Also, our Vietnamese hosts, who have been very gracious with their hospitality and strong support. I would just like to point out that not a single delegate here was not able to obtain a visa. This was a very huge success. This includes the Ministry of Construction, including the Administration of Technical Infrastructure, the International Cooperation Department, and the Vietnam Water Supply and Sewerage Association. Thank you very much. I would now just like to introduce Mr. Cao Lai Quang, again, Vice Minister, Ministry of Construction, who's going to provide a welcome introduction for us. Thank you.
Kính thưa các quý vị đại biểu, thay mặt Bộ Xây dựng Việt Nam, tôi nhiệt liệt chào mừng các vị khách quốc tế và Việt Nam đã đến tham dự hội nghị quốc tế về quản lý bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước và công trình vệ sinh lần thứ 3 do Bộ Xây dựng Việt Nam, Hội cấp thoát nước Việt Nam, Viện Khoa học Công nghệ Kỹ thuật Môi trường, Đại học Xây dựng phối hợp với Hội nước quốc tế tổ chức sáng kiến thành phố thông minh tổ chức tại Hà Nội, Việt Nam ngày hôm nay. Bộ Xây dựng đánh giá rất cao và xin chân thành cảm ơn Hội nước quốc tế, các đối tác đã tin tưởng lựa chọn Việt Nam là nơi tổ chức hội nghị quan trọng này. Kính thưa quý vị, quản lý bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước và các công trình vệ sinh đang là vấn đề rất lớn, rất là nóng của toàn cầu mà chúng ta cần quan tâm giải quyết. Theo số liệu thống kê gần đây, trên thế giới có khoảng 25 tỷ người sử dụng các công trình vệ sinh tại chỗ và không có điều kiện tiếp cận đến hệ thống thoát nước tập trung. 1,1 tỷ người không có điều kiện tiếp cận dịch vụ vệ sinh. Nhiều dự án ở các nước đang phát triển và kể cả ở Việt Nam tập trung vào việc xây dựng mạng lưới thu gom, nhà máy xử lý nước thải mà chưa quan tâm đến các hợp phần đấu nối thu gom, vận chuyển, xử lý bùn cặn từ các công trình vệ sinh, mà đây là nơi phát sinh ra nhiều chất thải, ô nhiễm, nhiều mầm bệnh, ảnh hưởng trực tiếp đến sức khỏe con người cũng như hủy hoại môi trường. Tại Việt Nam, tuy đạt được một số kết quả nhất định, song công việc quản lý bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước và các công trình vệ sinh cũng còn nhiều bất cập, hạn chế. Việc phát triển hệ thống thoát nước và xử lý nước thải tập trung chưa theo kịp với tốc độ đô thị hóa. Việc xử lý bùn thải từ các hệ thống thoát nước và các công trình vệ sinh chưa được quan tâm đúng mức. Bùn thải chưa qua xử lý hoặc được xử lý bằng các công nghệ thủ công lạc hậu đang được thải trực tiếp ra môi trường, gây ô nhiễm nặng nề. Nguồn lực cho đầu tư, việc lựa chọn các công nghệ hợp lý, công tác quản lý vận hành, nhận thức của cộng đồng và kể cả những bất cập hạn chế của khung chính sách đang là những thách thức lớn đối với Việt Nam. Nhận thức được các nguy cơ và thách thức, Chính phủ Việt Nam đã xác định bảo vệ môi trường là vấn đề sống còn, không chỉ ở cấp quốc gia mà góc độ toàn cầu. Với quan điểm phát triển nhanh gắn liền với phát triển bền vững, tăng trưởng kinh tế phải kết hợp hài hòa với việc bảo vệ môi trường, Chính phủ Việt Nam đã và đang tập trung ưu tiên nhiều hơn vào lĩnh vực thoát nước và vệ sinh môi trường. Với sự quan tâm của Chính phủ, sự nỗ lực của các địa phương, các doanh nghiệp, sự hỗ trợ tích cực, hiệu quả của các tổ chức quốc tế, lĩnh vực thoát nước và vệ sinh môi trường đã có những bước cải thiện hết tích cực. Chính phủ Việt Nam cam kết trong tương lai sẽ tiếp tục đầu tư quan tâm nhiều hơn đến lĩnh vực quản lý bùn thải. Kính thưa quý vị, Hội thảo quốc tế về quản lý bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước và công trình vệ sinh lần thứ 3 với các mục tiêu chia sẻ kinh nghiệm, các nghiên cứu điển hình, trao đổi thông tin và tăng cường sự hiểu biết về thực tế quản lý bùn thải trên thế giới và Việt Nam. Những vấn đề các nước quan tâm và đang tập trung trao đổi xoay quanh các khung chính sách, công tác lập quy hoạch, đầu tư phát triển, việc thu gom, việc vận chuyển và các công nghệ xử lý, tái chế, thu hồi bùn thải. Đây là những nội dung hết sức bổ ích đối với các nhà quản lý, các nhà khoa học, các chuyên gia, các doanh nghiệp đang hoạt động trong lĩnh vực quản lý hệ thống nước thải và xử lý nước thải. Hy vọng qua hội thảo này, Việt Nam sẽ học hỏi được nhiều kinh nghiệm quý báu từ bạn bè quốc tế, và Việt Nam đã xác định với sự ủng hộ của các tổ chức quốc tế, Việt Nam sẽ nỗ lực từng bước khắc phục những hình thức, thách thức và việc quản lý về bùn thải, phấn đấu trở thành một quốc gia phát triển bền vững, đồng bộ trên cả ba khía cạnh kinh tế, xã hội và môi trường. Một lần nữa xin cảm ơn các quý vị đại biểu với tinh thần trách nhiệm cao với vấn đề bảo vệ môi trường đã về tham dự hội nghị. Cảm ơn Hội nước quốc tế, các đơn vị đồng tổ chức, các nhà tài trợ đã phối hợp chuẩn bị thành công cho hội nghị này. Xin chúc các quý vị đại biểu sức khỏe hạnh phúc, có những ngày thú vị tại Hà Nội và Việt Nam. Chúc hội nghị chúng ta thành công tốt đẹp. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn.
Thank you very much. Hello. I would like to now introduce our second welcome presentation. This is from Associate Professor Dr. Nguyen Hong Tien, General Director of Administration of Technical Infrastructures. Professor Tien graduated in 1979 from Hanoi Architecture University in Urban Engineering. He has his master's in regional planning from the Asian Institute of Technology. He has a PhD in urban planning from Hanoi University in Civil Engineering, and he's worked for Urban and Rural Planning Institute of the Ministry of Construction from 1979 to 2003, the Administration of Technical Infrastructure, Ministry of Construction from 2003 until the present. He's the Deputy General Director until 2009, and now General Director of ATI from 2010. Please welcome.
Kính thưa ông Cao Lại Quang, Thứ trưởng Bộ Xây dựng, Chủ tịch Hội Cấp thoát nước Việt Nam. Kính thưa các quý vị đại biểu. Tiếp theo bài phát biểu của ông Cao Lại Quang, tôi xin trình bày một số thách thức trong quản lý bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước và công trình vệ sinh, cũng như một số giải pháp trong lĩnh vực này trong thời gian tới. Lĩnh vực quản lý bùn thải ở Việt Nam là một lĩnh vực mới, hiện nay đang được nhiều ngành, nhiều cấp từ trung ương đến địa phương quan tâm. Tuy nhiên, trong thời gian vừa qua, trong quá trình quản lý có những cái thách thức mà chúng tôi cũng đang gặp phải. Thứ nhất, tốc độ đô thị hóa nhanh và sự phát triển nhanh chóng của các đô thị sức ép to lớn lên cơ sở hạ tầng kỹ thuật đô thị, trong đó có hệ thống thoát nước và vệ sinh môi trường. Theo báo cáo của Bộ Xây dựng, hệ thống đô thị Việt Nam hiện có 774 đô thị. Tỷ lệ đô thị hóa trung bình của cả nước đạt khoảng 34,5%. Đô thị hóa tăng nhanh ở các khu vực đô thị lớn, lan tỏa và phân bố đồng đều hơn trong phạm vi cả nước. Đô thị đã khẳng định được vai trò và động lực phát triển kinh tế, thúc đẩy chuyển dịch cơ cấu kinh tế ở mỗi địa phương, mỗi vùng, cả nước. Với sự phát triển nhanh chóng và sự đóng góp to lớn của khu vực đô thị, sự phát triển chung của cả nước, nhưng tốc độ đô thị hóa nhanh, hệ thống đô thị phát triển quá nóng. Mặc dù hệ thống thoát nước đô thị đã được quan tâm, đầu tư, nhưng không đáp ứng được yêu cầu. Tình trạng ngập úng đô thị, nước thải không qua xử lý, xả thẳng ra nguồn tiếp nhận, gây ô nhiễm môi trường. Tại các đô thị Việt Nam hiện nay, phần lớn các hộ gia đình sử dụng hệ thống vệ sinh tại chỗ và chủ yếu là các bể tự hoại. Một số khu vực hay trên đường phố bố trí những hệ thống nhà vệ sinh công cộng. Phần lớn nước thải được xả vào hệ thống thoát nước công cộng, bùn thải từ các công trình vệ sinh này được thông hút, thu gom, vận chuyển chưa qua xử lý, đổ thẳng ra môi trường trong các hồ hoặc các bãi chôn lấp cùng với các loại rác thải đô thị. Bên cạnh đó, việc quản lý bùn thải từ hệ thống các công trình này chưa được quan tâm đúng mức. Bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước và công trình vệ sinh trong đô thị nếu không được quản lý đúng quy định sẽ tác động tiêu cực đến sức khỏe của cộng đồng, ảnh hưởng trực tiếp đến môi trường sinh thái và cảnh quan đô thị. Thách thức thứ hai là quy hoạch đô thị, quy hoạch thoát nước, quy hoạch xử lý chất thải chưa quan tâm đến việc thu gom, vận chuyển cũng như xác định các vị trí, địa điểm xử lý bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước và công trình vệ sinh. Cho đến nay, 60 trên 63 tỉnh ở Việt Nam đã phê duyệt quy hoạch xây dựng vùng, 100% đô thị có quy hoạch chung được phê duyệt. Các thành phố trực thuộc Trung ương đã và đang lập quy hoạch xây dựng chuyên ngành. Tuy nhiên, việc tổng hợp, phân tích, đánh giá hiện trạng về khối lượng bùn thải, công tác thu gom, vận chuyển, dự báo khối lượng bùn thải phát sinh từ hệ thống thoát nước và công trình vệ sinh còn thiếu. Việc xác định vị trí, quy mô, địa điểm xử lý bùn thải hầu như chưa có. Các công nghệ xử lý chưa được khuyến cáo. Việc thiếu quy hoạch các khu vực đổ và xả xử lý đang là những khó khăn trong thực tế hiện nay. Thách thức thứ ba, đầu tư xây dựng và triển khai các dự án. Trong những năm vừa qua, mặc dù đầu tư vào lĩnh vực thoát nước và xử lý nước thải có chi phí cao hơn nhiều so với cấp nước, nhưng với sự quan tâm của chính phủ và các địa phương, sự hỗ trợ và tài trợ của các tổ chức quốc tế, đến nay hầu hết các đô thị tỉnh lỵ của Việt Nam đều có dự án thoát nước và vệ sinh môi trường với các quy mô khác nhau. Nhiều dự án đầu tư xây dựng, xử lý nước thải tại các đô thị đã hoàn thành và đi vào hoạt động. Cho đến nay đã có gần 30 nhà máy xử lý nước thải tập trung với công suất khoảng 800.000 mét khối ngày đêm đã đi vào, và có một số nhà máy có công suất lớn từ 100 hay 200.000 mét khối ngày đêm. Tuy nhiên, việc đầu tư chủ yếu tập trung vào công trình đầu mối, nhà máy, trạm xử lý, việc xây dựng các công trình thu gom còn chậm. Phần lớn các dự án thiếu phần đầu tư cho thu gom, xử lý bùn thải từ mạng lưới thu gom cũng như bùn cặn từ các nhà máy xử lý. Cũng trong khuôn khổ của nhiều dự án ODA đã có nhiều nghiên cứu về ứng dụng thí điểm về xử lý bùn thải từ công trình vệ sinh như ở Hà Nội, Hải Phòng, Nam Định, Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh có thu được kết quả bước đầu. Tuy nhiên, việc nhân rộng hoặc duy trì kết quả còn nhiều hạn chế. Cái thách thức thứ tư về thu gom vận chuyển bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước và công trình vệ sinh. Bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước và công trình vệ sinh bao gồm bùn thải từ mạng lưới thoát nước sinh hoạt, nước thải công nghiệp, từ nạo vét kênh mương, các bể tự hoại từ các nhà máy xử lý nước thải, thành phần của các loại bùn thải khác nhau. Tuy nhiên, hiện nay bùn thải được nạo vét từ các cống rãnh, kênh rạch, bùn bể tự hoại được vận chuyển bằng xe chuyên dụng, xà lan, còn bùn thải từ các trạm, nhà máy xử lý tập trung sau khi được tách nước làm khô được vận chuyển đến các bãi chôn lấp. Công tác nạo vét bùn từ mạng lưới thoát nước nhiều đô thị vừa và nhỏ vẫn còn sử dụng phương pháp thủ công. Nhiều đô thị lớn bước đầu sử dụng cơ giới hóa. Do đặc điểm các đô thị Việt Nam là các đô thị cũ, cải tạo và mở rộng, cơ sở hạ tầng kỹ thuật còn hạn chế. Trong khi đấy, mật độ dân cư cao, việc thông hút, vận tải bùn từ bể tự hoại các hộ dân là cực kỳ khó khăn. Mặt khác, phương tiện hút và vận chuyển cũ, thiếu thốn, không đảm bảo vệ sinh, không phù hợp với điều kiện hạ tầng kỹ thuật. Thứ năm, về công nghệ xử lý bùn thải. Hiện nay trên thế giới sử dụng nhiều công nghệ để xử lý bùn thải. Việc xử lý kết hợp bùn thải từ bể tự hoại với bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước cũng đã và đang thực hiện ở một số nước châu Á, châu Phi hoặc tại một số nước phát triển. Tuy nhiên, việc xây dựng và vận hành hệ thống xử lý này tốn kém và yêu cầu trình độ cao. Ở Việt Nam đã bắt đầu áp dụng một số công nghệ xử lý bùn thải chi phí thấp. Nhiều sản phẩm được sản xuất ra từ bùn thải, ví dụ là vật liệu xây dựng sử dụng trong nông nghiệp. Ngoài ra, việc tái sử dụng bùn thải nhằm tiết kiệm năng lượng, thu hồi năng lượng từ quá trình xử lý cũng đang được quan tâm. Tuy nhiên, việc lựa chọn công nghệ nào cho phù hợp các sản phẩm sản xuất từ bùn thải phải đáp ứng các yêu cầu gì, tuân thủ các tiêu chuẩn quy chuẩn kỹ thuật nào và chi phí xử lý bao nhiêu, hiện nay cũng là đang vấn đề để ngỏ. Về thứ 6 là quản lý nhà nước về bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước. Về các văn bản quy phạm pháp luật, trong thời gian vừa qua, một số văn bản quy phạm pháp luật có liên quan đã được ban hành: Luật Bảo vệ môi trường năm 2014, Luật Xây dựng, một số các quy chuẩn kỹ thuật có liên quan đến quản lý bùn thải. Đặc biệt, trong Nghị định số 80 năm 2014 ngày 6 tháng 8 của Chính phủ quy định chi tiết một số nội dung quản lý bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước, quản lý bùn thải tự hoại cũng như các quy định về tái sử dụng bùn thải. Đây là văn bản pháp lý quan trọng trong lĩnh vực này. Tuy nhiên, còn một số vấn đề cần phải được tiếp tục nghiên cứu hoàn thiện. Ví dụ, cụ thể hóa tiêu chí lựa chọn công nghệ xử lý bùn thải, các quy chuẩn kỹ thuật liên quan trực tiếp đến bùn thải, các cơ chế chính sách ưu đãi, các chỉ tiêu, các định mức kinh tế kỹ thuật, các vấn đề có liên quan đến đầu tư, liên quan đến tài chính và về vân vân. Về tổ chức bộ máy, hiện nay quản lý hoạt động thoát nước và xử lý nước thải được thống nhất Bộ Xây dựng. Tại các địa phương tham gia quản lý bùn thải hệ thống thoát nước gồm có các sở chuyên ngành, các doanh nghiệp hoạt động trong lĩnh vực thoát nước và môi trường địa phương, bao gồm các công ty trách nhiệm hữu hạn một thành viên thoát nước phát triển đô thị, công ty môi trường. Ngoài ra, ngoài các doanh nghiệp nhà nước tham gia vào lĩnh vực này, hiện nay có nhiều đơn vị trong khối tư nhân tham gia vào dịch vụ thông hút bể bùn từ bể tự hoại. Về nguồn nhân lực, hiện nay nguồn nhân lực cho công tác tham mưu, hoạch định cơ chế chính sách từ trung ương địa phương, nguồn nhân lực cho công tác quản lý vận hành vẫn còn hạn chế, thiếu một cái chương trình đào tạo cho lĩnh vực mới này. Yêu cầu đào tạo, nâng cao năng lực là rất cần thiết trong thời gian sắp tới. Một số giải pháp cụ thể: thứ nhất, rà soát toàn bộ các ban hành mới các quy định có liên quan đến quản lý chất thải, đặc biệt bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước và vệ sinh. Rà soát các nội dung quản lý bùn thải trong các quy hoạch đô thị, quy hoạch xây dựng. Nghiên cứu áp dụng các công nghệ mới trong xử lý bùn thải hướng tới giảm tối đa việc chôn lấp kết hợp với yếu tố môi trường, kinh tế để đưa ra các công nghệ thích hợp, mang lại hiệu quả kinh tế cao nhưng bảo vệ môi trường. Xây dựng cơ sở dữ liệu về bùn thải, xây dựng các cơ chế chính sách huy động các nguồn lực tham gia đầu tư, quản lý, vận hành, đẩy nhanh tiến độ xây dựng các cơ sở xử lý chất thải theo quy hoạch, sắp xếp lại các doanh nghiệp hoạt động trong lĩnh vực, tăng cường công tác tuyên truyền, giáo dục nâng cao nhận thức cộng đồng, tăng cường công tác thanh tra, kiểm tra, tăng cường mở rộng hợp tác quốc tế và xây dựng một chương trình đào tạo, bồi dưỡng, nâng cao năng lực cho cán bộ quản lý, tham mưu, hoạch định chính sách cho cán bộ, công nhân quản lý vận hành và thành lập các trung tâm đào tạo cho lĩnh vực này. Kết luận, quản lý bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước và công trình vệ sinh vẫn còn khá mới mẻ Việt Nam. Hội nghị quốc tế về quản lý bùn thải từ hệ thống thoát nước và công trình vệ sinh được tổ chức tại Hà Nội. Đây là cơ hội cho các nhà quản lý, các nhà khoa học tư vấn, các doanh nghiệp Việt Nam có dịp tiếp cận, trao đổi các kinh nghiệm trong quản lý, ứng dụng công nghệ mới phù hợp với điều kiện Việt Nam. Nhân dịp hội nghị được tổ chức tại Việt Nam, các quý vị đại biểu có dịp tìm hiểu đất nước và con người Việt Nam. Ngoài việc tham quan các cơ sở theo kế hoạch của hội nghị, các vị đại biểu nên dành những thời gian tham quan những danh lam thắng cảnh của Việt Nam và hy vọng sẽ để lại cho mỗi quý vị đại biểu những kỷ niệm tốt đẹp về Việt Nam. Nhân dịp năm mới 2015, xin kính chúc các quý vị đại biểu sức khỏe, hạnh phúc, chúc hội nghị của chúng ta thành công. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn.
I would just like to say thank you again to our Vietnamese hosts for their hospitality, and thank you very much for these great presentations from our esteemed guests for their introduction to the gravity and importance of fecal sludge management to Vietnam and the relevance of holding this conference here and now. Thank you. So my name is Linda Strande. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the conference before I introduce our next two keynote speakers. So this audience is very aware of fecal sludge management and what it is. So I'm not going to take the time to introduce that topic to you here. But what I would like to do is just takes a little bit of time to emphasize the sheer volume of what FSM means. Worldwide, the sanitation needs of 2.7 billion people are met with on-site sanitation technologies. In urban areas of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, this is 1 billion people. But even with such a huge number of people served by on-site sanitation technologies, the management of fecal sludge that accumulates in on-site systems is still largely grossly neglected. Just 5 or 10 years ago, even a lot of people sitting in this room did not know what FSM was. But the times, they are a-changing. And FSM is now a rapidly growing field with growing awareness throughout the sector, as shown by the fact that there's hundreds of you sitting in this room right now, and even by the history of the FSM conferences, which have experienced exponential growth. The conferences grew out of the pit-emptying think tank meetings that took place at AAVOG now almost close to 10 years ago. Then the first FSM conference was held just 4 years ago. It was a seminar taking place in March 2011 in Durban, South Africa. The seminar consisted of 16 presentations from invited speakers and was attended by 120 delegates from 4 continents. We are really indebted to that same group, which also organized FSM2 in Durban, South Africa. FSM2 took place over 3 days, had more than 90 presentations, and was attended by 320 delegates, representing more than 30 countries and 5 continents. And now today, here we are at FSM3 with over 700 expected participants. People are coming from 55 countries, including 107 participants from Africa and 249 from Asia. The conference presentations will take place over 3 days with 124 podium presentations, 36 poster presentations, a full day of workshops, and 1 day of site visits. And just to give the organizers of next year's conference an idea of what exponential growth means, I plotted the data and fitted an equation. And it means that FSM4 should have around 1,900 attendees, and FSM5 close to 5,000. So make your reservations early. So with all of this exponentially growing attention on FSM, advances have started to be made in governments and funding agencies acknowledging the importance of FSM, planning and implementing policies and regulations, technology, business model, and resource recovery innovations, and capacity development. And speaking of capacity development, as many of you have hopefully noticed, within the last year, we published the first ever book on fecal sludge management. It's available hardcover and also free of charge on the internet. I brought it up here for some shameless self-promotion, but also just to make the point that our goal was to get it out as soon as possible to fill an urgent need, and for it to contain current state of knowledge. But in no way was it meant to be a holy grail for everything about FSM. And our actual hope was that it would actually be outdated really fast. And I feel safe in saying that already now, just this year, if we were writing it today, there's already a lot of new information that we would include. But my point is really, with all this growing acknowledgement of FSM, our work is just really beginning. We're standing at the bottom of a huge mountain of metaphorical sludge, and looking up at all that shit is really daunting. We need to all come together from all our respective fields and figure out how to tackle that mountain and hopefully harness it for some type of resource recovery. So hopefully in 5 years, we'll have a new version of the book that's 3 times thicker and much more comprehensive. And I'm challenging all of you here to make those solutions materialize. Since the first FSM conference, the goal of the FSM conferences has been to bring together a group of practitioners who are doing actual work in the field at scale, for them to communicate with each other and to foster a learning environment from young academics to national government level. So I'm not going to stand up here and tell you what to take home from the FSM3 conference, but I am going to ask you to identify 3 key points or findings from each session you attend. And we have asked all the session moderators to do the same. I'm asking you to think about questions like, what are the most exciting technical advances with potential to go to scale? What do you think the greatest challenges are? How can we fund FSM and sustainable service chains? Where should we focus our research efforts? So please discuss your findings with other participants and bring them to the final plenary sessions on Wednesday, where we're hoping to have a fruitful discussion about what each of us will take home from FSM3. So before getting started with the program, I'd just like to take a few minutes to say thank you. First of all, I want to thank all of you for attending. I know it was a very long way for many of you to travel. I want to again say thank you to our local organizers in Hanoi, the Institute of Environmental Science and Engineering, and our Vietnamese hosts who have been very gracious, the Ministry of Construction, including Administration of Technical Infrastructure, International Cooperation Department, and the Vietnam Water Supply and Sewerage Association. I want to thank the World Smart Capital Innovation of Cities for doing the massive work of organizing this conference. And I'd just like to say there's one person probably every single person in this room know the name of, which is quite unusual. And that's Julia Ackermans. And I would all like to just thank her very much for all the work that she did for us. I would also like to say thank you to the 18 people on the conference program committee, organizing committee, and advisory board committee for their dedication, vision, and hard work. I would like to say thank you to the sponsors for making the conference financially available and collectively providing travel grants for 150 participants to attend. I would also like to thank all the people that took time and volunteered to review abstracts and everyone that is also moderating sessions. I would also like to thank everyone else whom I forgot to thank you and mention here. A conference of this scale is an enormous undertaking, and it's impossible to acknowledge everyone, but without all of us collectively volunteering and attending, it would not have been possible. So thank you again to everybody. Thanks. So with that, I would like to say welcome and thank you again for attending. I wish you all a productive and rewarding week, and I challenge each and every one of you to think about this week how you can take what you learn here and take it with you going forward, and how you can use that to develop new and innovative solutions to FSM. So I want to say have fun, enjoy, and lastly but not leastly, good luck with the sludge truck trumps. So with that, I would like to introduce our next keynote speaker. I'm very honored to introduce Associate Professor Dr. Nguyen Viet Am. Viet Am was a key person of the FSM3 organizing committee from the Vietnamese side and a member of the program committee. He's a senior lecturer and director of the Institute of Environmental Science and Engineering at the Hanoi University of Civil Engineering, Vice President of the Vietnam Association of Civil Environmental Engineering, Head of Science and Technology Department, Vietnam Water Supply and Sewerage Association, and he has a long history of research in low-cost, decentralized sanitation and fecal sludge management. And he's involved in a number of national and international projects on policy advocacy, technology development, practical implementation, wastewater treatment, and fecal sludge management. So please welcome Dr. Viet Am.
Thank you, Linda. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This is my honor to be here to give you some information about fecal sludge management situation in Vietnam. you know that one reason why we decided to organize this conference here in Vietnam, because fake and sludge management is becoming more and more important topic in this country, and we would like to learn from you. And before you can come and share with your lessons, advices, I would like to give you some background information about this fake and sludge situation in Vietnam, so that it would easier to understand. So welcome to fake and sludge tour to Vietnam. Firstly, I would like to give some overview of sanitation situation in this country. We have 91 million of population living in 63 provinces, and centralized water supply is for 77% of population, with average water consumption is 100 liters per capita per day. Concerning wastewater, we have around 20 municipal wastewater treatment plants currently in operation, and more than 30 are under construction, and number is still coming in. 90% of population in urban areas having a septic tank, but only 60% of them are connected to the centralized sewage and drainage systems. So you see part of the effluent from septic tanks go directly to the environment untreated. Only 4%, based on our calculations, of septic is being properly disposed, treated, or used. And around 10% of wastewater is being treated. Every year, the country is spending 250 million invested for wastewater projects, and mostly this money is ODA loans. This is a picture how septic tank is connected to the centralized sewage and drainage system. Most of centralized sewage and drainage systems in cities is combined. So in most of cases, we have a black wastewater goes to the septic tank, and gray water is passing, not coming into the septic tank. And effluent go to the combined sewage, where it receives also storm water. In new urban area, we have a separate system, but in the along the street, in the main sewer, anyway, it's combined again with storm water in many cases. So the network is combined in most of cases. In new urban areas, you may have separate sewage system, only in few cities, and it's very expensive to upgrade existing combined sewage system into separate. The average cost for one household connection is from 200 to 300 US dollars per household. This is a brief description of the sector development history. The first septic tank has been introduced together with the French at the end of the 19th century. And by that time, we had also the first urban drainage and sewerage plan. You know, Vietnam had difficult years with different wars in 20th century, and only after 90s, we could start with infrastructure development, especially wastewater projects. And the first ODA wastewater project just started in 1995. And 10 years later, we have first fake and sludge treatment facilities. Very important, like Dr. Tien mentioned in his presentation, we have a decree on wastewater management. And recently, the new decree 80 have a special article on fake and sludge and household connection and other important issues. This picture shows different wastewater treatment plants in operation in cities in Vietnam. We are using different technologies. Pond technology, activated sludge process. This plant you are going to visit on Thursday. Discharging treated wastewater to Hạ Long Bay. Second stage batch reactor, oxidation ditch, trickling filter, so different technologies. And this is the largest treatment plant with the anaerobic digester. So that is the first anaerobic digestion in municipal wastewater treatment plant applied in Hanoi City. Sludge coming out from the sewage and drainage systems. Mostly we have two types of sludge, not talking about fecal sludge. We have dredge sludge from canals, and we have sewage sludge generated from treatment plants. And the most common way of dealing with this is dumping. And because of sewage and drainage system is combined, the inorganic concentration is very high, so we cannot do for a use. Composting is, sorry. Composting is in some plant. What happened? Composting is in some plants, and as I mentioned, the anaerobic digestion is applied firstly in Hanoi. Okay. Talking a bit about rural water supply and sanitation, you know that 2/3 of population of Vietnam still living in rural areas, but very fast urbanization process is taking place. And 40% of households are provided with clean water, and 80% of households are with toilets, but only two-thirds of them are with a hygienic toilet. We still have open defecation and unhygienic latrines, especially in mountainous areas and in Mekong Delta. To build hygienic toilet is not affordable for many families. Important thing here is reuse is quite traditional in Vietnam farming practice, but unsafe reuse is a challenge. In our studies, only 20% of families keep fecal materials before application to the field for more than 6 months. Now talking about fecal sludge, some problems and challenges. In many cases, fecal sludge management component is not included in most of sewage and drainage projects, and even not in the sanitation planning. Household owners do not empty their tanks, and most of households do not care where fecal sludge is dumped. And limited awareness of health risks from illegal dumping. And this picture is quite common when you see fecal sludge is dumped to the water, to the canal. And there is still old mindset and tradition. Many families consider a septic tank is enough for wastewater handling, and many families neglect to connect to the city sewage and drainage system because they have to pay money now and they have to pay money later for water bill, for wastewater tariff. So no willingness to pay for wastewater tariff. And another issue is like in central area of Vietnam, where we have sandy soil, septic tank is often followed by the circle-way chamber. And sandy soil can absorb the liquid going out from septic tank. And even in this very nice city of Da Nang, very fast-growing city in the central part of Vietnam, you cannot imagine the household connection ratio in some areas is just less than 10%. Because people have soak-away chambers after septic tank. Challenges also in terms of technical issues. Most of septic tanks in urban areas are installed in the foundation. And after construction of the house, the floor is sealed and they have no access to septic tank. And it makes people hesitated to break the floor, or they have to spend a lot of money and trouble in renovation it. So you see in this picture, people have to break the floor to access to the septic tank for emptying. And we know that fecal sludge has very high concentration of organics, nutrients, and other pathogens, and very expensive and difficult to handle fecal sludge. This is also a challenge. For management, the license for house construction and upgrading doesn't require design, and there is no control how do households deal with the septic tanks. And there is no control of the septic tank emptying. And these pictures show very common situation. Fecal sludge collected by private emptiers, they dump to the lake in the park in Hanoi City. And this guy makes things like his car has a flat tire. And he opens the cover of the manhole and discharge fecal sludge. They have the bottom discharge valve right in the center of the city. And he has been caught by environmental police. Talking about finance, low wastewater tariff and lack of city budget is also a challenge. And households prefer private emptiers who charge less the emptying fee than public utilities. So in one city, there are different enterprises offering this emptying service. And private emptiers normally practice illegal dumping. Our recent study with the Gates Foundation show in order to increase the benefit, most of emptiers try to find the closest, the nearest place where they can dump the fecal sludge to increase the benefit, and they make benefit. But if they should transport fecal sludge further to the designated landfill site, they may have not this benefit. About the wastewater tariff, we still have wastewater tariff less than actual operation and maintenance cost. Blue dot, operation and maintenance cost, and brown dot, wastewater tariff. So not enough for wastewater and not enough also for fecal sludge. And household pay this fee, wastewater tariff, and they pay for household connection, septic tank construction, and also for emptying of fecal sludge. Now I would like to share some information, the efforts we have been trying in fecal sludge management. A new decree, you have heard about that, and there is a special article stipulating fecal sludge, household connection, and resource recovery. We have also policies, and they are all the time being updated to promote private sector participation in infrastructure development, including wastewater management. And there are already some good cases where private sector in for wastewater projects, like a Gamuda project with the BT and Fudian Westlake project in Hanoi, BOT form of contract. And there are already some wastewater programs, including fecal sludge into the city sanitation strategy. These are IDB program and KFW GIZ wastewater program in nearly 30 provinces. This is one of the options where IDB project is considering introducing decentralized wastewater management and fecal sludge treatment station for the small town under the program. And some cities already have issued a regulation where household connection is compulsory and fecal sludge emptying should take place by the public service provider. In some cities, we have increased wastewater tariff, and in Haiphong and Sokchang cities, for example, the service provider provide a free fecal sludge emptying, and the expenditures for this activity is covered by wastewater tariff and by city budget. On Friday, you will go to Haiphong, and you will see the activities there with the fecal sludge management. Different technologies are applied in fecal sludge and in wastewater treatment sites. Here we have sludge drying beds in Hạ Long City. Here we have fecal sludge transported to a wastewater treatment plant, and fecal sludge is co-treated together with wastewater in Buôn Ma Thuột in Đà Lạt City. Here we have a thickening of fecal sludge, and later on it's dumped into the landfill. In Haiphong, you will see this fecal sludge stabilization pond. This is a sludge drying bed, and dry sludge is being composted. And here in Hanoi, some of you will go and, on Friday to see this system where fecal sludge is thickened and co-composted with organic waste. And the liquid phase is being treated in A2O process in the same station. Unfortunately, these two stations, the fecal sludge is not going here because together with the infrastructure, the organization has not been done. So the poor organization is one reason why we don't have the system operated. And use of treated fecal sludge, co-composting with organic waste, co-composting with sewage sludge. In Đà Lạt, on Wednesday, you will listen to one presentation of a representative of this treatment plant, where compost is sold to flower. Đà Lạt city is a flower city, and they use this compost for fertilizer. In Ho Chi Minh City, we have also composting, but organized and operated by a private firm. And in Cầu Dien, Hanoi City, you are going to visit this. We have compost also from organic waste and fecal sludge. There are a number of research activities going on appropriate fecal sludge treatment technologies. For example, this is our ongoing study together with Sandek partner on characterization of fecal sludge and other fractions of waste. We are looking at the potential resource recovery from this waste. We took nearly 100 samples from different septic tanks, from different owners, and see characterizations and influencing factors on the fecal sludge characteristics. And to get representing value, we have to have a right sampling method. With different partners from Linköping, from Technical University of Darmstadt, from Sandek, we are also conducting some studies on material flow analysis and aiming at a resource recovery in a sustainable way this is existing situation where we have most of resources are going to the environment directly without treatment, without recovery. And we are proposing the system where fecal sludge can be co-digested anabically with the bio-waste in the semi-central waste treatment station from where we can recover biogas for electricity and heat production and safe fertilizer supply to the agriculture. And we may reuse also treated water. This project is still going on, and this is our anaerobic digestion study in our laboratories. We're trying with the co-digestion of food waste and fecal sludge, and sewage and fecal sludge. And we try also co-composting of fecal sludge together with agricultural waste. So there are potential ways to recover the resource from fecal sludge and other waste. And when we talk about business, we have to talk about money, and from the point of view of the firm. And that's why we also do some money flux analysis. This is a study we did with the Gates Foundation 2 years ago, and the publication is in the Susanna website. And, we studied on the material money flows for private emptiers, for public utilities. So you see, public utilities dealing with fecal sludge collection, transportation, and treatment, they do not have benefit. That is the must-do thing. So we have to think to increase the tariff and to find other incomes. Otherwise, this business is not sustainable. And there are different guidelines are being prepared in this field. So the way forward. There is a number of stakeholders involved in fecal sludge management, and we need all of them. I take this graph, modified a bit, from Linda's new book, where we see from households to the national level, we have different players, and they have to put hands in order to have appropriate fecal sludge management activity. And as I mentioned, talking about the business, we have to talk about money. And there are different ways to find income, and we have to create a proper income in order to cope with the expenditures. For one fecal sludge management operator, they have to cover all these different types of expenditures, and besides sanitation tax, wastewater tariff, emptying tariff, you may have different incomes from budget support, discharge incentive, city budget, and also purchase price from reusable materials. And some recommendation. Fecal sludge management should be placed in a whole sanitation system, from household to the reuse or disposal field, from liquid to solid waste flows. Adequate awareness raising on fecal sludge management is needed, and policy strategic orientations, regulatory framework for fecal sludge management should be developed at central and local levels, covering urban and rural areas. Household connection and fecal sludge management should be part of sanitation planning and sanitation improvement projects, where a range of technology options should be considered. An effective organization for the O&M of drainage sewage systems, including fecal sludge management components, is needed. Fecal sludge management can be a separate business provided by public or private enterprises. It can be also included in existing public services, provided, such as wastewater and solid waste. In any case, actual cost of fake and sludge management should be calculated, and tariffs should aim at full cost recovery. Guidelines for safe reuse of excreta in agriculture and safe farming practice should be developed. And the last but not least, resource recovery should be advocated by appropriate policies, technical guidances, and institutional arrangements. It can be a potential driving force to attract private sector in fake and sludge management. So I would like to end my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for an outstanding presentation and a great overview and introduction to Vietnam. I'd like to welcome you to ask a few questions of Vietnam while we're here. And I think it'd be nice to focus them a little bit on the focus on Vietnam in preparation for the session on day 3 that he's going to be leading. Thinking about thoughts and similarities about the challenges faced here, how those are similar and different from challenges we face other places, and what we can both all learn from each other. So I'd like to welcome, if there's any questions starting. I can see up there. Yes, do you guys have the microphones? And could you also please start out by saying your name so we know who you are?
This is Engineer Shamsul Alam, Executive Engineer, Municipal Services from Bangladesh. So thanks for your nice presentation. You mentioned 20 wastewater treatment plant operation in your country, and another 30 is going to be operated. And also mentioned only one municipality is running by the local revenue, raising the local revenue. Also mentioned people are not willing to pay. But what is the condition in other cities? Is it operated by the local revenue or centrally financed? Is it in the break-even point or the losing concern? Thank you all.
You take some more questions, or I just address?
I think we could just answer one by one.
Okay. If I understand your question right, and thank you for the question. You're asking about the revenue sources for fake and sludge management. So far we have only one city of Hai Phong is running this fake and sludge management, fake and sludge septic tank emptying by schedule and from the wastewater tariff. So in average, wastewater tariff in Vietnam is 10% of water bill, but in Hai Phong they applied 15%. And they are going to increase every few years. That is a compulsory condition in the World Bank project a few years ago. And with this, wastewater tariff budget is transferred back to the wastewater company for scheduled septic tank emptying. If it's not enough, city budget will cover. And this model we think is one of the good models. And that's why some other cities now are starting to follow. For example, in wastewater program funded by KfW, a German wastewater program, in 9 provinces, the cities issue regulation where wastewater tariff can gradually increase. Wastewater, the household should pay the increased tariff and connect to the sewage and drainage system. And sewage and drainage company have to provide free septic tank emptying using that tariff. But it's not taking place in other cities. We are learning now from these new models. Did I answer to your question? From me, it's quite not difficult to hear. Yeah.
We take this question up here in the front.
Well, my name is Ashraf Ali. I'm from Bangladesh. I understand that, like in Bangladesh, in many cities in Vietnam, drainage system and sewer systems are combined. And in Bangladesh, this is very common, and this is not only polluting rivers surrounding the cities and other water bodies, but also making FSM very difficult. And you mentioned that it's very expensive to separate these two systems. How this should be handled? Do you have any plan or any ideas on how this could be handled? Thank you.
Yeah, this is very difficult question. Maybe not difficult to answer, but very difficult to realize. Household connection is very expensive, and in many projects, the household connection component is not included. They want to deal with main sewer trunks and centralized water treatment plant. And because of no household connection, wastewater is not coming into the treatment plant, and they are working under capacity for 10, 20 years. And we are wasting borrowed money. And now the following projects are learning from this situation. And household connection should be included into the project like one important component, together with awareness raising, together with enforcement, together with a cross-subsidy for the poor families. So after project completion, the local authority cannot deal with the household connection. So you have to include it right from the project implementation period. So you should design it, and that helps. And with household connection, you may have better septic emptying services later. And in many cases, like in Bumi Thuột city in central highlands of Vietnam, they shift from combined to separate sewage and avoiding septic tanks. So septic tanks are sealed, filled with sand, and they avoid. They break the floor and connect sanitary facilities right to the sewer in front of the house. And the city provided some support, and households should pay the rest. But a big awareness raising campaign should take place in order to make a household understand. And you have to knock every door to get people involved. This is tough. But without that, wastewater treatment plant will not work. There is no wastewater coming in. So that's why in my recommendation, we should include these components into the project from the beginning. There is one.
We have another question here, and then also to mix it up, I'd also like to hear somebody ask a question, something about how does Vietnam relate to a problem in Africa, for example, and not just looking at the regional perspective.
Thank you. My name is Chandra Stemorang from Ministry of Public Works of Indonesia. Thank you for your very nice presentation, and it interests also in our experience in our country. Based on your presentation, you have 63 provinces and almost 800 municipalities or local government. And can I ask you how you ensure, or central government ensure, the implementation of the sanitation management in local government follow the regulation that already prepared by central government? And we know, based on the rule you presented, almost all the activities for the sewerage management, especially for vehicle sludge management, is taken by local government. Can you explain us how central government ensure local government can implement its in good activities? The second question about the operating and maintenance. I don't know who taken the operating of maintenance of the facility that already construct. Can you explain, and who implement the operating and maintenance, central government or local government, and how you ensure they can operate and maintenance the facility follow the good standard based on the central government role? Thank you.
Yeah, it's also a very challenging question. In this country, we have nearly 800 cities and towns divided into 6 categories. We have 2 cities, special categories, Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, and then first category, second, and further down to small towns. So far, we have wastewater projects only in big cities. I would give the number 70 cities and towns now. We start to have wastewater projects. Wastewater sector is new in Vietnam. We just started it 30 years ago, and we get wetting lessons. For the smaller towns, it's just still combined sewage systems. And mostly they are drained, and houses, when they are built, they are connecting to the drains along the streets. For these small towns, there is one body under the local authority management called public utility. They are in charge of roads, lighting, green space, and also drainage to prevent from flooding. When the wastewater project is coming in, we start to have capacity building, and the model of organization has to be set up at the same time, together with the capacity building, etc., etc. So in the decree 80, it says local authority should be in charge, and the body who operate can be formed, and mostly, in most of cases, they are public utility. And because the tariff is still low, so they have to, based on the subsidy from the local authority, from the local budget. They have to run by local budget. So in my presentation, we have one graph showing the difference, and that is our challenging. Every 2 years, we have water tariff is increasing, and the percentage of wastewater tariff is increasing accordingly. So that is the good trend, but it takes time. Did I satisfy?
It's a great question. It's very challenging. I think we have time for at least one more question. I know a lot of questions. There was someone in the back that's been raising their hand for a long time.
Hello, my name's Anthony Kilbride. I work in Haiti, and one of the problems we have in Haiti, and here in Vietnam, is dumping of fecal sludge. And this is illegal in Haiti. The government is very clear that dumping is illegal, but the government has very few powers to stop people, to stop companies from dumping their fecal sludge. So I was wondering what you do in Vietnam to try and enforce and stop the dumping of fecal sludge. Thank you.
There are different ways. But if you tell the enterprise, the businessman, not to do profit, it's difficult. And they try to dump because they can shorten the transportation distance and they make more benefit. So together with our awareness raising, you have to have strict control. In some cities, we have very strong environmental police, and the illegal dumping trucks can be confiscated or kept for a few months so that they could not run. And in Bình Dương, for example, province, they give the price $25 to the public who can call and find the case of illegal dumping of fecal sludge. This is a good incentive. And if the trucks are licensed, you can have remote sensing. You have a GPS and know the route they're traveling to control it. So there are different ways. We are trying.
That question definitely has global relevance. I'm going to just say one more question here, and then we're going to move on, and then afterward there will be time later for more discussion, and then we'll also for the rest of the week.
My name is Michael Quinton. We do vermicomposting of sludges in New Zealand. When you increase your collection of sewage sludge, you potentially produce a high quality product, dried biosolids, vermicompost, compost. which can increase revenue for you. Have these considered as an option for your business models, or what are your preferred options with the increasing volumes of high quality biosolids?
Yeah, about this, maybe Linda has more. We have now 2 projects going on with Sandek. One is the POOR project, resource recovery from sewage, from fecal sludge, and the other is the RRR, where we try to find a suitable business model in different places, in Hanoi, in Lima, Peru, and in Uganda. Yeah, we have to develop, and we have to have a point of view of the enterprise. And if we don't show them the benefits, they will not come in to the game. Resource recovery, it's a very nice word, but you have to be very much clear, and you have to persuade people by concrete figures. Either you go for composting, or you go with anaerobic digestion or co-digestion, because you know fecal sludge is very difficult to treat anaerobically separately, because they have very high ammonium, they have already partly digested organics, so we have to conduct co-digestion. But co-digestion requires better organization of the service, because you have to deal with wastewater, with solid waste, with different service providers. So this is not only a matter of techniques, but also a matter of organization and institutional. The studies are still going on, and I would be happy to talk more with you. We have a booth. Our institute has a booth in the corridor, and we are happy to share with you some initial results.
Great. I would just like to say thank you again for the outstanding introduction to the local situation in Vietnam. Hopefully it piqued everybody's interest for the session on Wednesday that will be a focus on Vietnam. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So the presentation was specific to Vietnam. I think we're going to step out a little bit more and talk about a regional perspective now. I would like to introduce our next keynote speaker, Ms. Almu Dwights, who joined the World Bank in 2007 and is currently Principal Regional Team Leader for East Asia and the Pacific and South Asia at the Water and Sanitation Program. WSP is a multi-donor partnership administered by the World Bank to support poor people in obtaining safe and sustainable access to water and sanitation services. She is managing a program of activities in 10 countries: Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Laos, Pakistan, Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, Timor-Leste, and Vietnam. Prior to joining the World Bank, Ms. White held the various project task management positions at the Asian Development Bank in Manila and in Jakarta over 8 years. She started her career as a policy analyst with the United Nations Development Program in New York, where she was based for 4 years. She is German and Italian national and holds a master's in economics from Free University in Berlin. I'd like to give us a warm welcome for Ahmed.
Thank you very much, Linda, for this kind introduction, and distinguished guests, and especially representatives of the government of Vietnam, first and foremost, but also representatives of other governments who've come from very far, I understand, and colleagues and friends. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to listen to Dr. Viet An give us insight about where Vietnam is currently in terms of fecal sludge management, and I hope I'll take you back a little bit and give you a bit more of a bird's eye view into the question as to why we're actually here, and talk about turning the tide of fecal sludge. First of all, a bit of a confession. As Linda said, I'm German-Italian by background, and my background is such that you are, in my cultural environment, you state pretty straightforwardly who you are, what you stand for, and pretty much tell your children similarly to always be pretty upfront of what they stand for and whatnot. So So I will, I'm a confessed poo hugger. And those of you who haven't seen that yet, it was pretty clear last year at the Bill and Melinda Gates organized toilet fair together with the government of India. I fell into the trap of hugging the poo. And I'm also somebody who will drag their children out of bed. The picture next to it is my son wearing a t-shirt. We went for a 5-kilometer run in the early morning heat of Singapore on World Toilet Day, and his t-shirt clearly confesses my views as expressed as his, and it says, if you can't read it, I'm running because I do give a shit. And my children still love me, even if they have to do this, and they love particularly the fact that they can use the word shit as long as they talk business with me. They're really happy about that. As most of you know, if you have topics about fecal sludge, shit, whatever, with your friends who don't know what you're doing, they're either very grossed out or they laugh about it. But in fact, once you start explaining, they start understanding it's a very serious matter, and that's why we're here. And the reason is, around the world, about a third of humanity actually live in cities and towns in developing countries, and yet we have only recently really starting to take this issue very seriously. Globally, something like 100,000 tons of fecal sludge is produced daily, and is, as Viet-An pointed out, and many of you know, many of us see in countries, it's informally handled, it's dumped somewhere, there is a regulation, but it's not enforced. So all of this is sort of done under the table, lots of it. And when I say 100,000 tons, I don't actually really know whether that number is correct. We just know it's a huge number on a daily basis. And we also know that this perilous tide of fecal sludge is actually growing daily. And we're all here to see how we can work towards making sure we bring this under control before it drowns us. Use that visual image on your innocent friends at lunchtime. Fecal sludge drowning us. Those of you who are a little bit older in the audience will remember that sanitation was the forgotten little brother or sister of water supply for a long time. In fact, if you go back and look at a lot of project documents of the, say, 80s and 90s, you will find the project titles say water and sanitation projects. And I will confess, I was handling a number of those as well in my times at my previous employment when I handled water and sanitation projects. They used to turn out to be 80 to 90% water supply and a little bit on the side on sanitation. And if you think back, that only started to really change when the World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg in 2012 added sanitation to be part of the Millennium Development Goals. And so the target 10 of the MDGs was previously only read to have, by 2015, the proportion of people without a sustainable access to safe drinking water was updated to include having, by 2015, the proportion of people who do not have access to safe sanitation. And then to achieve these common targets, common global targets, the first action was actually to establish country baselines, and this is where most of you know this. The joint monitoring program of WHO and UNICEF was born, and countries started examining their baselines. Where do they actually stand? Where do they start from? And at the same time, a number of development agencies also started to take a critical look at their programs to see what they had been doing in support of sanitation, and similarly found out very little. And it was not at all encouraging at the time. And it prompted a number of us to look very carefully as to what has to change. How do we give sanitation more of a priority? Under the MDGs, sanitation was defined as household level access. And it's the access to a safe toilet. So it was really good to stimulate a first debate about and the necessary step towards getting sanitation at its most basic level, international and also international development agendas. And we do need to acknowledge that progress has been substantial since then. If you look at the latest Joint Monitoring Program update of 2014, 2 billion people have gained access to improved sanitation, and 77 countries have actually met the MDG target on sanitation. We should acknowledge that. We should not say there hasn't been anything. There has been a lot happening. Then we can go to the however. And the however, as most of you know, is 2.5 billion people still don't have access to improved sanitation. And out of these, 1 billion practice open defecation. And the global target of reaching 75% with improved sanitation is unlikely to be met. Very unlikely, as we're now in 2015, as we know. And while currently this is predominantly still a rural problem, 9 out of 10 people who practice open defecation live actually in rural areas, it is changing with growing urbanization, and actually the numbers of people practicing open defecation in urban areas is where you see an increase these days. 2015 is a very exciting year for most of us in the sector, I think, because it has a combination of looking at how far we got in terms of achieving the Millennium Development Goals. There's a lot of stock taking going on. And at the same time, it's the cumulative year of agreeing on a new set of targets. And as you know, the deliberations this year are ongoing and very intense in New York and other places to come to an agreement on the proposed new Sustainable Development Goals. Some of you have been very intensely involved, including some of our own colleagues, in setting those new targets, in setting the indicators. And so far we know that 2 broad objectives are being put forward that should make us all excited about where this is going. One is the notion of universal access and leaving nobody behind. Everybody is supposed to have a safe toilet that includes people living in remote areas, in crowded urban slums, in challenging environments, and for people who are old, who are disabled and disenfranchised in any other way. What that means is really a strong push to make sure that the bottom percentages of every of those categories get a stronger increase in the next few years. We focus on those people and make sure that access is really universal, as the word should say it. And then we have also, I think, collectively as a global community started to understand a bit better that when we started with access to toilets, and we see now that building and counting toilets just isn't enough. In densely occupied areas especially, services are needed in addition to the toilets, and to safely remove, transport, and then treat actually the human waste. And this is what we're going to spend most of the week talking about. So the second important objective of the proposed new Sustainable Development Goals on sanitation is this new dimension of focusing on sanitation services, especially in rapidly growing urban areas where housing is dense and latrine pits cannot be covered over and then rebuilt. From a public health, it brings the public health perspective more into this debate. And it's just not really a household matter anymore. But the whole domestic and urban environment is affected, as we know. Letting fecal matter overflow from the tank to the drain or river outside, or letting tanks dump it, pretending they have a flat tire, as Viet An very nicely explained to us, moving it from the pit down to the road and dumping it in the nearest river is just not good enough. And we know that, and that's being acknowledged now, I think, more globally. Given that on-site sanitation is really used by a great majority of people in all developing countries, sustainable sanitation in urban areas requires planned, deliberate, and hygienic fecal sludge management, in addition to the much smaller fraction currently being served by sewerage. For example, if you look at it, across urban Africa, less than 10% of the residents have access to sewage systems. And if you look in many countries in Southeast Asia, you look at Indonesia or the Philippines and Laos, you also have under 10% access to centralized sewer system, in some cases as low as 2% countrywide. One of the reasons why fecal waste needs to be removed completely and hygienically from the domestic and neighborhood environment is that there's a really strong correlation between fecal pollution, which is kind of a proxy for open defecation, population density, and stunting. Most of you know this. Early childhood stunting, which is below standard height for age, is an indicator not only for physical, but also for cognitive development. So if stunting occurs in the first 2 years of your life, it cannot be regained later in life. That's it. You cannot regain, and it reduces lifelong not only your health potential, but also your employment potential and your earning potential. We know that because of a lot of research that has been done over the past years. Dean Spears and his Rice Institute has analyzed a huge data set in 172 countries and have controlled it for wealth, for education, for ethnicity, religion, and many other variables. And this correlation between open defecation, stunting, and density remains very strong, and has shown also a direct relation to the infant mortality rate too. So this is not really an urban-rural issue. It's an issue about densely populated areas where this correlation between stunting and open defecation is very strong. And if you think about it, these research results really make sense. All of you, including myself, we've been around, we've been looking at urban slum areas. We see children playing everywhere. They play under the houses on stilts. They play in the water when the rain has just stopped. In floodwaters, they play in water that is standing there for a while. And it doesn't really matter whether they have a latrine at home or not. They go home after playing in this environment. They go home, they play with their little siblings, they touch their toddlers and babies, sisters and brothers. And these are just a few of the many contamination rounds possible. So now that we've kind of established that fecal matter matters actually quite a bit, a great more than it's commonly acknowledged, where does the fecal waste currently go, and does anyone really care? So over the past 2 years, we did a study in the Water and Sanitation Program of the World Bank, and did a quick review of how fecal sludge management works in 12 cities across the globe. We looked at African cities, Asian cities, Latin American cities. We picked different sizes from mega cities to smaller towns. Some with a very high rate of access to sewage systems, some had none whatsoever. We wanted to have sort of a sample of different situations so that nobody afterwards can say, yes, but that's only for small towns and that's only for the bigger towns. And the results were very interesting on many levels, and we're actually doing a lot of additional work with partners on this now. We found that for the 62 million urban dwellers that live in these 12 cities, more than 2/3 of the residents in these cities rely on on-site sanitation. And that's rich and poor. It's not the poor that rely on it. In some places, it's everybody. Only 22% of the total fecal waste is managed safely, and that means the waste from about 48 million people actually pollutes the environment in these cities. And in only 2 of the 12 cities is more than 50% of the fecal waste effectively managed. So this was just a sample of 12 cities. And imagine doing this for a lot more cities and being able to use that as the entry point when discussing what sanitation plans are necessary for a city. Sewage is important. I don't want to sound as if it's all about fecal sludge management and nothing else. Sewage is important in developing countries, and it will increase. We know that, and that's a good thing, but it will increase very slowly. It is expensive, and it takes quite a bit of time to get the financing for it and then get going. It won't go at a very fast rate. And our study shows very clearly that currently the focus in planning, in financing, in thinking is on the sewer minority and how to increase that from, say, 5% in a city to 6% to 7%, while fecal sludge management is neglected and left largely to the unregulated sector. So for example, in a city like Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, sewage access is about 10% of the urban population, but the budget for sanitation swallows up 99% of the total budget available for sanitation. It goes to serving that minority that is currently connected. In Dhaka, in Bangladesh, sewage access is about 20% of the city, and it's operated by the utility, but that leaves about 80% of the city, or 13 million people, largely relying on on-site systems that are not as regulated and not as taken care of the rest. So a great deal more needs to be done, and I think we can safely state that we're way behind in terms of seeing where fecal sludge management needs to be carried to. We need to generate a lot more knowledge through practical and applied research and learn from actual real-life conditions. But to do that effectively, we need to change our mindset and we need to change our way of operating, I would say, on sort of 4 or 5 different fronts. The first one is to think about sanitation service delivery away from infrastructure construction. Sustainability really requires that we focus on no longer on toilet construction, on the construction of the individual parts that need to be part of the chain, but on the whole chain, and institutionalize the service approach aimed at ensuring that all fecal waste is managed safely all the time, and creating those service markets. So every city, or many cities, will have a patchwork of different systems in place. All of them need to be taken care of. All of them need to be looked at. Not one left to deal with itself and the other is regulated. We need to plan more adequately from the start for operation and maintenance, and not just for the ribbon cutting and hoping that plants will work. This issue that Dr. Viedan also pointed out about tariffs and finding ways of generating the funding that comes, it's important, it needs to be built in. Systems need to be paid for day after day, year after year, and they need to absolutely be priced at a level that people can afford them, A, and second, be introduced to the fact that it's important to pay for them and why. We do, I think, need to think much more poor inclusive. We've had a debate at some point within my organization about poor inclusive versus pro-poor. I think it's both. My sense is that you need to, if you look at a city and a citywide development, you need to think about where the poor, you need to understand where the poor live and what service they have. And a lot of cities, at least in Asia that I'm familiar with, it's all scattered within. So you need to have the full understanding of where they live. And then second, you need to think about whether you need particular pro-poor policies in order to make sure they're included in the whole system. So you kind of need both. It's not really a versus. It's both of it together. And you need to think citywide and at national scale. I think there are a number of really exciting, good pilots being done, and it's fairly, I would say it's fairly easier to do that in a controlled environment, in a well-resourced project on a small scale. But if the idea of large scale isn't built in from the start, it will end up being just that pilot. It will not work beyond that. So I think this idea of thinking of big dimensions, and if you go to countries like Indonesia or Vietnam, you have to have those 775 municipalities in mind, not the one that you're currently working on. You need to start thinking of a path together with government how this can be scaled up, or how this could be scaled up. And let's be honest, I think we really don't know everything about fecal sludge management yet. I think we have, as I said, a number of interesting stories to tell, but are we able to sit down with a government of the size of India, or even a state in India, and tell them how to handle this? I don't think any one of us should have the guts to say, yes, we do, because I don't think we do at this point. Sewage systems have been around for millennia. The Romans built them, right? But hygienic fecal sludge management is much newer, and especially at that scale, and there are very few countries where it is working at that scale that we're talking about, at the sort of 90-10% scale, at the 80-20% scale right now, that we can point to. We don't have a lot of examples to point to. So has the tide turned on fecal sludge management? My sense would be right now, not yet. But I see movement in that direction, and I'm optimistic based on 3 key observations. The first one is that the development community has definitely woken up to it. Fecal sludge management is much higher within my organization, within the World Bank's agenda right now. And the discussion is very different from 15 years ago, or 10 years ago even, when fecal sludge management was not part of projects. Now you see a lot more projects coming up, holistically looking at sanitation. And actually, one of our directors of the new global water practice that Water and Sanitation Program is part of said this is a game changer. We need to really get onto this and make sure this is in every project we look at fecal sludge management being included. So this is important. I think a lot of other partners, starting from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, DFID, USAID, SANDEC, of course, and WUSOP, all of them at many universities have been doing a lot of work, and you will see that reflected in the next 5 years in a lot of programs, government programs, development partners projects. You will see that reflected. And also the evidence is right in front of us. I mean, Linda pointed out, this is double attendance from the last fecal sludge management conference. And there's a reason for it. And the reason is that this is becoming a very, very important topic for many of us. The second key observation for me is that governments are talking much more about planning for combined on-site and off-site solutions. It used to be a bit of a hard sell. I feel nowadays, especially traveling around in the Asia region, it's squarely on everybody's mind. We have a lot of very pragmatic policymakers who talk about this. In fact, last week I talked to the Director of Environmental Sanitation Development in Indonesia, and Indonesia's plans are to have universal access to sanitation by 2019, and their plans show 95% will be on-site. And so he's very aware of it, and he also said, you know, help us out, figure out a way. How can we do this at that scale currently? We know that for the next 10 years, this is what we're going to focus on. We have to, because we can't just leave it out. It's too important. The third observation to me is that you have a development community talking about it, you have governments talking about it, and now it seems, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed, but I'm quite sure, it's coming together in writing in the Sustainable Development Goals. And people are willing to put it on the table. The proposed goals will require everyone to take the whole sanitation chain into account. Indicators are being put up. So I think with that level of commitment, we can be optimistic. And I think achieving that global, so the challenge comes back to us now, because they're going to turn around, look at us and say, what are we proposing in terms of large-scale solution? I cannot emphasize the word scale enough. Have I said scale enough? Scale, scale, scale is what it is. Scale and speed is what governments will require, because they want to tackle it now. This is something that they don't want to postpone for the next 15 years. This is something they want to deal with now. And I think for all of us, this is an important element to remember when we sit here for this week, learn a lot about new ideas and models, like question people about how this can be scaled up and how they can use it, and go forward with governments to discuss this in a very productive way. So I hope that all of you, and I know that all of you are excited about hearing new things and new innovation. I'm hoping for a lot of dialogue between the different parties and constituencies that are here. And I wish everybody good luck for the week. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for an outstanding presentation, really giving us an introduction of some of the global issues that we need to think about with fecal sludge management and things we should focus on all week. We have about 10-15 minutes left in the opening session, so I'd like to open the floor for a couple questions for Ahmed, and then maybe wrap up with a couple of people already identifying what their important points are that they're identifying. So if we have some questions for Ahmed. Here?
Hi. Oh, that was too close. I'm Sally Brown from the University of Washington in the States, where I'm known as Sally Sludge to many people that oppose biosolids. My big question for you,
You stand up.
I am.
Sally's right back there.
I'm standing.
I don't see you.
I'm short, I'm sorry.
Can you jump?
One major failure of our system in the States that I haven't really heard addressed here is the failure to take into account the end user and the value of the product. You talk about public health concerns, but as a soil scientist, one of the biggest health concerns that we're seeing is food security and the potential food shortages with the growing population, overuse and destruction of soil resources. And even though the amount of fecal sludge that's generated compared to the land base is small, if it's properly treated, it's one of the best tools to restore soils and restore soil productivity. So I would just encourage you in business models to involve end users and involve some sort of revenue associated with end use or something to encourage end use? And if you could address that.
Now, that's an excellent point. I think you touched upon two things. I think you touched upon the fact that the consumer needs to understand what is in it for him or her. And in many countries, actually, the health messages are not the ones that will work. We know that from a lot of research that has been done on end consumers. Health messages in many countries are, this is a God-given thing that I have nothing to do with. You will have to find other avenues to make fecal sludge management something important enough for them to want to spend some money on it. And aspects of that could be adding a business to it. That's an important, so the end user business is an important one. Adding the aspects of safety and security of your children is an important aspect. So you have to really explore a much, much better understanding of the end consumer. And the big question is, why are they not interested in it right now? Do they not know? Probably. Do we have to just tell them by finger pointing and saying, you must? No, doesn't work. So what is the right combination? And it's a very localized, in my view, a very localized research that one has to undertake in order to find the right entry points to ensure that this becomes something in your everyday life that you are willing to pay something for, that part of your community maybe can make a business out of it, and that way convince the rest of them that this is important, etc. So very good point. Thanks.
This is Samsul Alam, Executive Engineer, Municipality, Tungipada, Bangladesh. Sanitation for all and all for sanitation. This is a double-edged problem. People living in big cities are capable of paying more than the people living in small cities. Mainly projects are designed for the big cities, but the people living in small towns have the rights to have sanitation regarding FSM. How this problem can be solved, especially for developing countries?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a tough one because I don't think there's a generalized answer to it. But I would say, so let me put it straight. I think, and I don't want to beat around the bush, I think the subsidy element needs to be discussed in each country and carefully evaluated what, to whom, for how much, how targeted. So I don't want to give a blanket answer because I don't think there is one. We know that from affordability studies, in some cases, what it would require in terms of full cost recovery just cannot be paid for by the end consumer. Fair enough. Let's think about ways to pay for that gap that exists through some public-private combination, right? I don't think you can blanketly state it's this way or that way. I don't think you can even blanketly state that in larger urban cities the citizens have automatically more money to spend than in the small towns. It might also be very different systems that you can set up, and you might end up having it actually cheaper in some places in smaller towns where maybe the conditions of density are not as bad as in urban areas, and density can increase your price quite rapidly. Or people living in urban areas in especially challenging environments where whatever you propose is very high cost. So I think it requires a very careful analysis of the financial power of people, the financing of the government, obviously, and who's going to carry the burden of whatever additional financing is needed in order to make this a viable construct is very important. But I think it requires very, very detailed local analysis for that.
I see one question in the middle in the very back there.
Hi, this is Asim from India, Sept University. Mike, I have a comment on this. We should also train the local contractors, construction contractors and all, because they are the ones who construct the septic tanks. In India, what we have found, the similar case that we've seen in Vietnam, the toilets are constructed over the septic tanks. There is no access. So if you don't have access, you cannot empty the septic tanks. So if you train the local construction contractors and the city engineers, so that the design of septic tank has an offset to the toilet, so it can be easily emptied. So this point needs to be taken up also.
I think again, I think it's a very, very important point that you touched on, and I think we need to be careful and not to vilify the current informal sector and those people who are actually operating those trucks. There's a reason they're operating this way they're doing right now. And Viet An pointed rightly out, their business, this has to make business sense for them. So any new regulation or imposition we make on them needs to be carefully weighted so that if we drive them out of business, do we have an alternative? Probably not. So you need to find a very careful balance between wanting to regulate them, that the sticks and carrots, I think, need to be carefully applied. It's not all about controlling. We had this discussion, I remember, in Indonesia at some point, where we talked to a number of truck owners in some cities who are really doing generally a good service. Sure, they're doing, they're dumping some of their stuff on the side, but they're trying to do the best they can. You need to regulate them, there's no question, but you don't want to regulate them out of the market unless you have another alternative ready. So I think it's tricky, but that this debate between them, especially those in the informal sector, and the government authority needs to start. And it might be in the beginning not so easy, because they're very reluctant as well. They've built something for themselves, and now you come in and impose something. So what is a win-win for the two ends? I think it's very important that we take this very seriously and don't just think about cutting out the industry without really having a plan for what else is there and who else could take care of this.
We have time for one more question right here.
Thank you. Thomas Hoffmann from Border. And I have a question looking at the financing of FSM projects or sanitation projects. I still have the impression that a lot of projects are more looking at bigger scale projects. And you were mentioning on-site systems, rather more small systems. What capacities are you referring to? Thank you.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand the last question on capacities.
Treatment capacity.
Okay, so this is an important topic. Most of you know that when you go through sanitary engineering schools in many countries, how many of you, hands up, how many of you have learned a lot about fecal sludge management while they're studying sanitary engineering? Okay, thank you. A few, that's good. But a few, right? Mostly not so much. This is a side topic. It's dealt with in sort of, it's not part of the mainstream yet. And I think as long as that is the case, and a lot of people who are sitting in government, who are your counterparts in government in those institutions, in the public works institutions, they're coming through the same schools. So there is not much of an awareness, and nobody should be blamed for it. It's just how you have been trained and learned to look at sanitation is different. To get to that dialogue and to get to that understanding, I think you need to do it jointly. I don't think you can preach. I think if the analysis of the situation, sort of the fecal sludge diagnostics that we've shown a slide here and that we're doing a lot of, if that is done jointly with local government, with city planners, that's a very good first step, because then it's jointly owned. Then everybody understands the situation. And then you can start a very different dialogue about, so how do you want to focus your projects in the next 5 years? And you may not get everybody on board. You may still have some that don't want to. But my sense right now is you get a lot more response at city level to wanting to deal with the whole of sanitation rather than just with that sort of prestige project that was supposed to be extending the sewer system in one part of the town. I think it's not an easy it's not an easy entry point, and it takes more time, and sometimes time is of the essence, of course, but I think it is an important one to find that entry point. And then we have to collectively kind of start thinking about how we can rapidly get more of these types of topics into existing curricula. Like we've done on rural sanitation, for example, in Indonesia. It took us 4 or 5 years to change the current program of how rural sanitation is taught in public health schools in Indonesia. It took a long time, but eventually it got done. And so now the curriculum is a lot updated. It has information in there on how you deal with rural sanitation the way it should be done, and it's fantastic. Can this be maybe done in more existing universities, institutions, technical, polytechnic universities, whatever, in different countries? Upgrading the information and the learning on fecal sludge management, I would say, is very much the onus is on us to make sure that that is happening across the board. Thank you.
Great. Thank you again for an outstanding presentation on the issues we're facing. Just to get into the spirit of the conference, before we wrap up the final session, I'd like to get 3 brave individuals to stand up and already say what are some of the take-home messages that they got from this session, or even what do they want to take home from the conference in the end, and what should we be thinking about. So this is already first homework assignment. Can't have coffee until one of you stands up at least to start. And certain people were thinking about it before they came. What do they want out of the conference? We have a number 1 here. Number 2 over there. And number 3 there.
Okay, I'll give it a try. My name is Antoinette Koma. I'm from SNV. I have 3 points. One thing that I thought was interesting to think more about is the presentation by Dr. Vietnam about the different bits and pieces of investment that households need to make to have a full service. And they need to build their septic tank, they need to have it emptied, and they need to pay the wastewater treatment fee, and they of course need to pay the water fee, where there's also a lot of non-revenue water. He mentioned the inclusive tariff for emptying in Haiphong. And the other thing which I think was a good point, which is an important takeaway point, cannot be mentioned enough, is no sewerage without household connections inside the project. Not taking for granted. I know that in Indonesia there's still a discussion about households paying their connections. And then I think the last point that Almut mentioned was also very interesting. Don't regulate the informal sector out of the market if you don't have an alternative.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Susmita. I represent an organization called CDD Society in India. I think one of the take-home points for me here from this discussion was the perception and preferences of end users. And I think that is very important, that we need to analyze that much further from what we have done till now. And the reason is because if the policies, regulations that we put in place, if the end user's perspective is not taken into point, then the policies will not be sustainable. And from a recent study that we conducted in the satellite towns of Bangalore in India, what we have seen is that end users are ready to pay or willing to pay for treatment as long as it is not too expensive. And too expensive means not more than, say, $3-4 per person. And this is something that we can definitely think of, that people are willing to pay if the price or the cost to them is reduced, and they are interested in that. And I think one of the other points that is very important is that we definitely can't get the informal people out of business, and it is very important to see how we include them in the proposals, in the policies that we set up. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. 3 was right there. Want to stand up, please?
Okay, I'm Jay Bhagwan from the Water Research Commission in South Africa. I think I was part of the conceptualizing of the fecal sludge movement, and this is the 3rd event, and what I'm not seeing coming through, and I want to respond to Almut's sort of comment that we do not have any suggestions for local government or even state governments. Yes, we do, okay? The answer is do not produce sludge. And I think if we aim this conference and this movement towards not producing sludge, okay, it's unfortunately the loan sharks will go out of business. I mean, wastewater is a business for them, okay? So that might have a consequence. It will have an impact on the politicians because, you know, their votes might get affected. But at the end of the day, it's about people and the convenience you bring. So we hear quite a lot around these aspects, and we should be talking about off-the-grid, non-sludge producing technologies, etc. What we've done now is dealt with the consequences that we've created in the past interventions. Looking forward, and I hope that this conference starts looking forward to a world where we do not produce sludge. And the movement is going in that direction. And if the paradigm changes and the behavior changes with the loan sharks, the politicians, the professionals, I think we'll get there very quickly because it's on the horizon.
Great, thank you. I hope you're not asking us to all personally stop producing fecal sludge. I just have a few housekeeping things to mention briefly before I let you go. As soon as this session is over, this room will break into 3 rooms, and these will be rooms 1, 2, and 3 where all the sessions will be held. Lunch will take place on the 7th floor. All abstracts with all the presentations for day 1 are now online, so if you'd like to review more in detail before you go to sessions. And just briefly during the break, we're asking the Vietnam delegation speakers and moderators to step outside the front door for a quick picture by the FSM banner. Like that, I would like to wrap up the morning session. We'll just meet here and then coordinate from there. So thank you very much. We'd like to wrap up the morning session. Thank you all again for attending and for all the great presentations. Thanks.